morning. Thank you to Havas for the invite. I love Havas. You can use that as an advert. I'll come back to why I love Havas in a bit. And I love the building. Congratulations. And the environment is the third teacher is something that's quite important. And I love being here, and I find it inspiring that Harry Potter used to catch the train just up the road to go to school. I think that's quite amazing. I've got a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a nearly 12-year-old. It's interesting how you're never 11, but you're always nearly 12. And so I'm sitting in this thing somehow as a parent, so that bit comes into it as well. And I was looking with my nearly 12-year-old, who reminds me a little bit of the girl boss. And I was looking with, what are you going to do this week, Dad? And I said, I'm talking about Generation Z, and we were quite confused because we thought it was the last one. So I'm a bit worried about what comes afterwards, really. But there we are. I want to talk about little kids, and I want to talk about your responsibilities. Because it's all very well sitting there, and it's all very well talking about the product that you are about to employ, but they come from somewhere, and they are someone. And I get a bit worried sometimes when we're talking about a segment. Which segment is that? Is that the segment of the children who live in the council housing that burned down yesterday? Or is it the segment of children who go to highly paid independent schools? There is more to people than a segment. They are someone. They come from somewhere. They feel something. And when you get that product, you need to bear that in mind. You must never forget that you are not allowed to do that. Every child is everybody's responsibility. And I'll come to that in a minute. Children can only aspire to what they know exists. So when we talk about children's futures, if your experience that you've grown up in a house where there's no carpet, where there are meters, where there's no books, where your parents are ill-educated and nobody's had a job, your aspirations are limited. If you've had everything, or most things, like my kids, your dreams are wider and your horizon's wider. And part of the thing that we need to do is enable children to see more, which is part of what we do. A very quick run through our education system in 30 seconds, and you'll understand what I mean. We have an education system that's top-down. We have a government of whatever making that decides what children should be taught, not learn. It's called the national curriculum, and we get schools to teach that to the children, and the schools are accountable for how well they deliver the government agenda, and we do that through so-called Ofsted inspections. Please note, for those who are writing, there's only one F in Ofsted, and league tables. And this must be one of the very few countries where you can have a discussion, a debate about education without mentioning the word child once. That's the first bit. Then the schools, I go to primary school and I finish at primary school. I've done my SATs. I get passed on to secondary school. What do the secondary schools say? They're not quite good enough, you know, but we'll make up. So they go through secondary school and then they go post-16. What do they say at post-16? They're not what they were. Then they go to uni. What do the uni say when they get them? They can barely read or write these days, you know. And then they go into the world of work and they say, it's not the way it was. You have no idea the skills they're lacking. Now, my challenge to the world of work is put up or shut up. Get off the fence, invest in people and who they are. Think in your heads about junior apprenticeship from the age of 4. Widen their horizons. I was talking fairly recently about junior work experience. Everybody kind of quite liked it, except for the health and safety people who fainted in the corner and had to be hospitalized. But hey, there we are. So what do I do? And building a creative approach to social mobility is what we're doing with Havas and Havas Helia, and a bit more about that.
I'm one of the few female pilots. I've been to America, Spain, and I love every minute of it. Air traffic control has cleared us for takeoff. Okay, let's go. People, property, and postcodes. I call it the 3 Ps. Hello, Mrs. Smith. How can I help you?
I have won lots of awards. When I was a school child, I was directing my school play. It's not a job, it's a calling.
A Romeo.
a Romeo.
They see surgery as an art form. It's vital to keep a cool head. Scalpel?
I'm a bit of a petrol head. I could have been a doctor, but I prefer cars. What's not to love?
And we are live in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, and welcome to the 9 o'clock news.
KidZania London, a city made just for kids aged 4 to 14.
So we built it. It sits on top of Westfield. There are 24 globally. I'll run you very quickly through what it tries to do. Yeah? We try to take children from inspiration to aspiration. They do jobs. Really, there will be 40 plus globally, and the most important thing is that when they're inside, grown-ups are there to be seen and not heard, so you can't interfere. You can work in a bank, you can window clean. Kids have just told us that they want to be vets, so we've just done a deal with the vets, and we're not going to have real animals, but we don't have real patients in the hospital either. Just before anybody says anything, 60% of the schools that visit us have got 40% or more free school meals. We give away 10,000 tickets a year to the kids who need it most. And any child who is on in the lower, for want of a better way of putting it, socioeconomic block can come for, I think, £5. Yeah, and that's quite deliberate. I'm very proud of that achievement. Can we do better? Of course we can. Have we made a decent start? I think so. We do 500,000 kids a year, and there's very clear evidence that it makes a difference. Why does it make a difference? Because we keep you out of it. Okay. And kids are amazing, and I love it, and I walk around every day, and sometimes it moves you to tears when they start spontaneously collecting things, or kids start calling for a minute's silence because we'd forgotten about it. You kind of go, Jesus, that's amazing. That's really, really amazing. It is as amazing as the 2 boys who were working in the bank and transferred 17 million KidZos, our currency, into the bank accounts of their mates. There's entrepreneurship for you. Yeah? So, and entrepreneurship is also many other things. These are the things we do. I wanted to talk very briefly about my granddad. When I was 9 years old, I sat on my granddad's lap. It was a day like today. My granddad was a coal miner. He had very bad lungs. His hands were arthritic. And my granddad said to me, always do your best at school. And when you're 9, you're programmed to ask why, so I did. And he said, because I don't want you to have hands like mine. I knew from that moment onwards why I was going to school. People say it's a stupid reason. It was my reason. So it was not stupid. I ask kids these days, why'd you go to school? And they go, because you make me. I don't think that's a very good idea. I also incidentally remember days at school when my maths teacher, Mr. Youngstra, I grew up in Holland, stood there and went, if A is 3 and B is 2, what is C? I don't know. I'm not interested. I don't know what you're asking me. I don't understand your language. So I think the other bit that we do is provide an element of relevance. The kid who walks away, sense of achievement, not sense of attainment, with the front page of a newspaper, knows why reading and writing is important, because I've just produced it, I can take it home and I can show it to my grandparents. We all like to show and tell. I drove my new car around the estate for ages wanting to see people that I bought it. Yeah, why do we take that away from kids and talk about grades and those kind of things? It doesn't make any sense. So what we try to do is, that's school. Think about the language that we use, please, the language that you use. Education in this country does not mean learning. Education now means schooling. Yeah? It's a very different thing. Entrepreneurship doesn't mean starting your own window cleaning business on a council estate. It means becoming a millionaire really quickly. Think about the language that we use with the children we're trying to work with. That's what we try to do. We try to connect the dots, or rather, we try to let children connect their own dots. The boy who stood there, being the estate agent, and who looked bored. He looked bored, rigid. So I went up to him and I said, what are you doing this for? And he went, well, I don't know, I don't like it. I said, well, why are you doing it then? He said, you mean I can stop? I said, you can do what you like. You're going to have to live with the consequences because you're not going to get paid for your job, because we have our own payment and economy and stuff. And he went, I get that, but I still don't want to do it. He said, I never get a chance not to do things in school. It's an interesting thing what we try to do with our children. how often do we role model children? Yeah, how often do we do what I did in Wythenshawe, where I worked for many years, and the kids, we used to talk about role modeling a lot, but quite frankly, what really happened was we told children what we thought they ought to be like. Yeah, so Jim O'Neill, him of Goldman Sachs and now Lord Jim, grew up in Wythenshawe. I stood in some hotel conference, I talked to Jim for a bit, and I said, you went to Cross Acres Primary School? And he said, I did. And I said, you need to come back and talk to those kids. And he said, why? I said, because we taught you to read and write, and that's why you are where you are. He comes back every year. How powerful is it if he stands in front of those children and goes, you see number 26 across the road? And they go, yeah. You see that window on the top left? And they go, yeah, that's my bedroom. There's something about locality, there's something about matter, there's something about recognition, there's something about connect. And that's different for the kids from Wythenshawe than it is for the kids from Chelsea. And that's okay, they're both brilliant. It isn't either or, we just need to, personalization is not cutting up the segments into smaller blocks. Personalization is starting bottom up from the youngster and working that way up. Primary schools do that brilliantly. That's kind of what we think should happen. And that's what we think is required. We're doing some work with OECD as well. They have this brilliant title, 2030, The Future We Want. So we're trying to put some stuff together on education and the way we think it should go, which is kind of quite hard. But hey, hard is quite fun. One of the first realizations that we need to have is that not all classrooms have 4 walls. If I had 30 of my kids here now, there'd be a better learning experience. Just seeing you guys and standing here in front and doing a presentation or whatever else would be a better learning experience in terms of preparation and delivery and skills and whatever else than a whole week in a classroom. School's boring. Not because it is, but because we make it that. So we took 61,000 children across the piece, pink, purple, black, white, whatever, old, young, rich, poor, and we looked at what were their first choices. And we sat and we've had some fun with your colleagues. Yeah, have a serious fun. And some of those findings were completely startling. This is all in the public domain, as it should be, because the public should be using it. This is what we found. Some of it obvious, but it was reinforced. Some of it amazing. So deprivation affects children's aspirations. Yeah, children can only aspire to what they know exists, came completely through in this. But where they come from also matters. Kids in the north of the country choose different activities than kids in London. There's a real trend that sits in there. Slight difference between service industries and manufacturing, as one of my Havas colleagues put it. Stereotypes continue to impact on all aspirations. Don't believe the nonsense you hear about STEM. It makes no difference. There you are. As Nicky Morgan, the former Secretary of State of Education, said to me, but girls now outperform boys. Yeah, they do, because we've taught them to pass the tests better. It's not substance. The aeroplane pilot activity, cabin crew activity, age 4. 70% girls, 30% boys, cabin crew. 70% boys, 30% girls, pilot. Massive sample. Age 14, the stats remain the same. Oh, and by the way, if you come from the 20% of the poorest areas in the country, you don't go into the aeroplane because you have no connect. That's the challenge. That's the reality. So what are we doing next? We are going to do this globally. We're going to do it in Mexico next, and then we're going to do it in Kuala Lumpur, and we're going to do it in Brazil, and then we're going to produce a kind of barometer of children's aspirations. And I hope that there are lessons going to be learned. I'm very excited about the Saudi Arabia analysis because it's the only place in KidZania, Jeddah is the only place in Saudi Arabia where young women are allowed to drive. So that's quite cool. So I want to just get underneath all of those things. We're also going to go and consult in the autumn in the UK with all sorts of people and all sorts of organisations, and we're going to present, I bet, in January 2018 recommendations to the government as to how careers, education and awareness should change. If by the age of 4 the patterns are set, why on earth do we wait for 10 years before education we begin to talk about that? And why, slightly controversially, but why do we leave talking about careers up to people who know nothing about them? I love teachers. Good teachers are gold, beautiful, but they're not programmed for that. What they are programmed for is to find the teachers. So to talk to Graham and say, can you come and talk about your job to our kids? Because this is what we're doing at the moment. Yeah? So the question also becomes, who is the teacher? Every child, everybody's responsibility. We need to do this differently. Otherwise, we're going to end up in one hell of a mess. Can I recommend that everybody, I love that. Can I recommend that everybody familiarizes themselves with the works of my very good friend, Professor Carla Rinaldi, who is one of the co-founders of something called the Regio approach, which is about early years education in Italy. They've got schools globally. I personally think from the learning agenda, she is the most important educationalist for the last 100 years. And she's the loveliest of people. She is the Edith Piaf of education. She is absolutely beautiful, she's wonderful, and she focuses on the child. The environment is the third teacher, is Carla Rinaldi's phrase. Why are we teaching children about transport inside a classroom? Take them onto the pavement, show them, yeah, these really simple examples. And then teach them about health and safety, people fainting and all that kind of thing. We have to be patient. We have to be patient. We have this nasty habit in this country that everything should be achieved within 5 years because I need to be re-elected. The sad thing of governments that knew that they were there for the longer term, as much good as the Blair governments did in educational terms, their failing was they never had the balls to take a long-term view, and they could have afforded it. It's going to take more than 5 years to put right what it's taken since the 1944 Education Act to be allowed to go wrong. And the investment needs to be a society investment, all of us. And that's easier said than done because we're all going to go off and we're going to be really busy in a bit. But you have to consider that. Personalization. If you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. Our challenge, and we're only a tiny piece of a jigsaw, but I think the work we're doing with Harvard is really important. I think it's groundbreaking and will be taken on board globally by lots of people. Our challenge, and my challenge to you is, when you go back, just occasionally, when you talk about HR and recruitment and all those things, can you put the person in the middle and see what fits round, rather than take your organization and try and force people into a box? Thank you.